Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the funeral service. We ask for those that have a cell phone or pager, if you could turn it to the silent mode. We're going to begin this service with the reading of the 23rd Psalm that's in the handout that you received when you arrived. Then we'll have some family members come up to speak. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We have Ronald and Lloyd come up.
Good morning. On behalf of Ronald and I and the entire family, I want to thank you all for joining us this morning to celebrate Barry's life. Barry spanned two generations, the first with me as the big brother, and then with him as the big brother to Ronald, who he adored. Since I've known him the longest, I'll start. Barry was born in 1946, and I had come along earlier in 1942. I was excited to have a new brother, but babies are not very good as playmates, so the excitement wore off pretty quickly. But eventually there came a time when we started doing things together in the house, in the building, in the backyard, in the alley, maybe stealing chunks of ice from the ice delivery man's cart while he was upstairs in the porches making deliveries. We lived at 4835 North Kimball, in the Albany Park neighborhood. It was a large apartment building, really nice. It had a beautiful landscape courtyard facing west. Our building backed up to the alley. Single-family houses were located, for the most part, on the other side of the alley. Our building was the second large apartment building on Kimball, north of the Lawrence Avenue commercial corridor. We were located between Roosevelt High School, south of us, and Von Steuben High School, several blocks north. But we knew nothing of high school. Our school was Hibbard Grammar School. It was within walking distance and occupied a full block. Barry would have started at Hibbard around 1951. We would walk there together. It was 4 stories tall, as I remember, and it was a really nice building as well. Kimball and Lawrence was the hub of Albany Park. It was the terminus of the Ravenswood CTA train line, now called the Brown Line. And there were many popular restaurants on both sides of the street. We had the Balliman Cats Terminal Theater. It was just down Lawrence a little way. And across from it, a small theater called the Metro. We never ate at the restaurants. All we cared about were the movies. Our apartment was a tiny one-bedroom apartment with windows in the living room facing the courtyard and rear windows facing over the alley. We lived on the first floor. Mom and Dad shared a hideaway bed in the living room, and Barry and I shared bunk beds when he got bigger. To my memory, it was plenty big enough then, and I believe Barry felt the same way. It was just Barry and I until our sister Sharon was born in 1949, and she remained in the crib for the next year or two. The building was owned by a relative, Mr. Wolf, which was the only way you could get an apartment after World War II, find a relative. The building was filled with actual or supposed relatives. My dad's sister, Aunt Ruth, lived in an apartment elsewhere in the building with our 2 cousins, Larry and Joan Domash. Larry was a genius, a physicist, ended up years later in Princeton. Joan ended up down in Houston living with one of our dad's brothers. Israel Sonenthal. Finding and reconnecting with those relatives became a passion of Barry's in recent years, since the internet and social media made it possible. In recent years, Barry made a special effort to reestablish those contacts with Larry and Joan. He would share photos of Joan's family with Ronald and I. He also tracked down our other cousins who grew up in Houston, where Joan had settled. This was Alan and Marcia Sonenthal, the children of Israel. But let's return back to the early 50s. There came a time when Barry was no longer a baby, but a pesky little brother that I was responsible for, who would tag along with me on Saturdays to the movie theater on Lawrence Avenue. One of my most vivid memories is returning home one late Saturday afternoon, filled to the brim with popcorn, with visions of acting out one of the movies we'd seen that afternoon. We do that every Saturday. Play whatever we saw at the show. It might be a swashbuckling movie, but for the most part, it was Air Force, United States Air Force. And so what we would do is we'd get cardboard boxes, turn them into the Air Force fighter jet. I would be in the front flying the box, and Barry would be in the rear watching out for enemy fighters approaching. Anyways, we're coming home from the show, cutting through the alley as we usually did, and I'm dragging him along to get him to hurry up. We need to get home, I'm saying. And then he trips. Bang! He's face down on the ground. Totally my fault, but all I can think about is, how do I cover this up? And worse, I pull him upright, and his upper front tooth is hanging out of his lip and bleeding. Holy cow. So as a dutiful older brother watching out for my younger brother, naturally, I jammed the tooth back in place and tell him, don't tell Mom. And he covered for me. It didn't work, of course, but he impressed the heck out of me by trying to cover it up. At the north end of our block at Ainsley Avenue, Cross Kimball, was the Deborah Boys Club. It opened in 1946. It was a terrific place. It was filled with arts and crafts. Barry was finally able to go there when he was 8. It had numerous classes on puppetry and ventriloquist dummies. Someone of stature was involved in mentoring the program. My one recollection is it may have been Paul Winchell, who was a then famous ventriloquist, or it may have been Bert Tillstrom of Kukla, Fran, and Ollie fame of the early 1950s television. But the point is, I am certain it established a desire in Barry's soul to become a ventriloquist, which he did. He did become one, and Ronald will tell you more about that. I don't know how Barry got interested in magic, but what became as a once-in-a-while thing, or started as a once-in-a-while thing, became an avocation and then almost a profession. When my kids were a lot younger, Eileen would put together birthday parties for the girls or Brian. On more than one occasion was Uncle Barry performing with Harvey, his ventriloquist dummy, or doing magic tricks that was a surprise entertainment. He carried his love for magic forward into the future for the rest of his life. He was really very good. He was really good as a magician. He only got better and better over the years. He joined magic clubs and they would perform for each other. He worked in a magic store and mentored young people who displayed an interest, including my grandsons, Carl and Mike, who later put on shows using the tricks they bought at Uncle Barry's store. You had to be good to fool your peers in the magic clubs, and he was that good. But what impressed me the most was his interest in the history of the profession, his acquisition and study of the old books on magic written by the famous practitioners. And again, that's the future. Let me return back to the 50s. So back in Chicago, particularly after Sharon was born, the apartment was way too small, after all. We only had a single bathroom. And so with my mom's father's help, our parents bought a building in Skokie with my Aunt Annette, Uncle Al, and cousins Paul and Susie. They all lived on the second floor. We all lived on the first floor. And that's where we lived for a long time thereafter, through grammar school, junior high, which was a concept unknown in Chicago, and then attendance at Evanston Township High School. Barry was 4 years behind me, so he graduated high school in roughly 1964. He tried college, but he didn't really like it. It was not to his liking. And he decided he'd just wait around until he got his draft notice for the Army. The problem was Vietnam. It had morphed from a place the Army was training South Vietnamese to fight their own battles against the Viet Cong when President Kennedy was alive, into a full-blown war with the North since President Johnson had been elected. And that war was killing a lot of people every week. As a context, our sister Sharon had died from leukemia in 1958. It was devastating for my parents. To lessen the pain, they decided to have another child, and despite the risk, my mom got pregnant, and lo and behold, Ronald was born at the beginning of 1962. I had gotten married in 1964. I was out of the house. So it was Barry and Ronnie. I asked Barry to consider the Navy. The Navy was a 4-year commitment, and while the Army commitment was way shorter, it was even more shorter if you died in combat. So I said, Mom and Dad could not lose another child. They were raising a new baby. Would he please reconsider his initial desire to just wait for the draft notice? And he did reconsider. In fact, he immediately went down and joined the Navy for our parents' sake, forgetting about his own thoughts. Understand, there was no guarantee that joining the Navy would keep him out of harm's way. It just, just roll of the dice, right? But luckily, he stays safe. And he looked really impressive in his Navy whites. He was always real thin, and that uniform, fit like a second skin. And on him, it looked fabulous. And just figuring out how to wear that goofy hat took up most of boot camp. And he had great stories about boot camp at Great Lakes, saluting cracks in the sidewalk, for instance. Well, I don't know why they had to do that, but that was part of the requirements. He was assigned to the 7th Fleet out of Norfolk, Virginia, and he saw a lot of the world, particularly in the Mediterranean where the 7th Fleet was located. He visited Greece, he saw the ruins. But seriously, Barry did his duty in the time of war and served his country for 4 long years. 4 long years. Back then, people did not thank servicemen and women for serving as they do now. But Barry never complained about his naval service. He really enjoyed himself. In fact, when he came home, he had a new trade. He had learned to be a barber in the Navy, but in order to be licensed in Chicago, he still needed to attend an accredited barber school, which he did. He went down there every day, took his lessons every day, and eventually came the time to take his final exam for his license. Our grandfather, Herman, who was the best ever, volunteered to go with him and went downtown with Barry to be shaved closely with a straight razor. That was gutsy. Barry was licensed as a barber in 1972 and cut hair from then until just recent surgery. That was when he said he had somebody, Stuart or somebody, go pick up his tools. So all these years. Barry still lived at home in the Skokie apartment in the early years of the 70s with Ronald. My daughter Karen remembers she was staying over at her grandma Shirley's apartment one day and watching my mom crochet. It was one of my mom's passions. Karen wanted to learn how to do it, but Karen was left-handed. And my mom was having a devil of a time figuring out how to convert the hand movements when she remembered Barry is left-handed. So she called him into the living room, and Barry and Karen spent the rest of the afternoon figuring out how lefties crochet. They both ended up making potholders. So Barry was always the volunteer and always the hard worker. For all those years he cut hair during the day. At some point he joined a team at Dominic's Foods to become a valuable baker working nights. Days in the shop, nights at Dominic's. He retired from Dominic's after 24 years. He did whatever he needed to do to take care of his family, who he loved.
My brother Barry was cool. Now, the Barry that many of you know was a husband and a dad and a proud grandfather, someone who worked incredibly hard for his family, and I knew that Barry too. But as Lloyd said, I'm the baby of the family. Barry was around 16 when I was born. Lloyd was married and out of the house by the time I was 2. So for a while, it was just me and Barry. And I wanted to do whatever he was doing. I was following him around all the time. We shared a room in our apartment in Skokie. I'm sure he didn't love sharing a room with a little kid. I made it a point to always climb on his dresser and get into as much of his stuff as I possibly could. He wanted out. On the other end, the place just wasn't that big, so there really wasn't a lot of choices in the matter. So there we were. By the time I was in kindergarten, Barry was off to the Navy. After his discharge, he lived at home for a long time till he bought his own place, fell in love, and got married. When he came back from service, he was kind of like an adult. He needed a job and luckily found a way to use his creativity and his talent by being a barber. And I think it was a role that gave him joy. I know many people know Barry from his time at the barber shop or the magic store. Before the question comes up, Barry cut my hair once. The less said about that, the better. Suffice it to say that you never want to do anything that involves giving your older brother scissors and a free rein. Barry was actually a great magician. He was a student of magic. I was always his first audience. If you ever want to do something that's going to help your self-esteem, do a little magic trick for your little brother. It always kills. In fact, he pointed out a favorite magic trick to me just a few weeks ago. As Lloyd mentioned, Barry was a ventriloquist and a really, really good one. He would perform, and in fact, a photo of his ventriloquist dummy, Harvey, getting a haircut still hangs in King's Cuts in Skokie today. Not necessarily a repeat customer, but in short, Barry was creative, artistically talented, and he had the patience to do things right. I had none of those skills. He was talented, he was cool, and I wanted to do so close. I wanted to do anything my big brother did. So Barry used to build model cars. I don't know if you ever saw the boxes of model cars. He would meticulously prepare each part. He would file the rough edges. He would paint each piece so it looked exactly like the photo on the box, only better. I mean, the thing was unbelievable. He had a stand for him in high enough up that I couldn't get to him because I thought there was something to play with. As I got older, of course, I wanted to do what Barry did, so I quickly found out I had neither the skill nor his patience. When I tried to do the model, the glue got everywhere. I couldn't get the paint in the right place. I didn't understand why I just couldn't go to step 7 from step 2. There was a whole process there I didn't get. All of that was a big no-no if you wanted to have something look as good as Barry Sonenthal did it. At this point, I should fess up and digress and tell you that when Barry left for the Navy, he carefully and meticulously packed all of his models. I assume he wanted to avoid me playing with them and inadvertently breaking one. The mistake he made was he put them in a box in our shared closet. The only way I could get to the top shelf of the closet was to use that as a stepping stool. Perhaps a mini tramp at times, but in general... Anyway, when he returned home, the box was compressed to about a quarter of its size. Every model, save one that he never really liked, had been destroyed. My family should be grateful that he didn't kill me at that point, and honestly, it was a marvel he didn't. After the Navy, Barry was home. Barry was into top 40 music. He wore his hair kind of long. He tried a mustache, and he smoked a pipe. He could draw his own comics. He'd been in the Navy, and I thought he was just great. I wanted to do everything he did, but I couldn't. I wasn't that talented. I mean, I was, actually, he was in the Navy. I couldn't swim, so that was a problem.
He never learned.
He fooled them.
100%.
The last few months have been pretty horrible. Elyse has been an amazing wife, never left his side. Staci and Mike have been incredibly helpful and supportive, as have Stuart and Jen. Stuart and Jen worked really hard to get Barry to see his beautiful grandkids, John and Lexi. near the end, I think Barry would rally when I would come by. In retrospect, I don't know if I really helped at all. Or if he just wanted to put on a good show when I was there. I don't know. The one thing I do know is that my brother Barry, he was cool.
So, again, it's a sad day, but it's a day to celebrate the life of Barry and the memories I hope that you all have, just as Ronald and I have, of a talented, artistic, fragile, but yet strong, active, and a hard worker. Nobody worked harder than Barry. So we love him, we miss him, and thank you very much.
We can all rise for the memorial prayer. אל מול הרחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים מתוארים כזוהר רקיע, מזהירים את נשמת ברי סוננתל. שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו, אנו בעל הרחמים הסירה בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וצרור בצור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, בשלום המשכבו, ונאמר אמן. Repeat it in English. It's in the folder that you received. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Barry Sonenthal, who is gone into eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life, be God's possession, and may he repose in peace. Amen. You may be seated for a moment. This concludes the funeral service here at the chapel. The interment will take place at Shalom Memorial Park. The approximate driving time is 10 minutes. For those who will be joining their family at the cemetery, we ask that you line up on the west end of our chapel. We'll be placing a magnetic flag on your vehicle. We ask to have your headlights and hazard lights on while in procession, and just drive as close as safety permits to the vehicle in front of you. At the conclusion of the interment, the family will be sitting shiva at the Sonenthal residence, 776 East Pennsylvania Drive, apartment 33-2. They'll be there for the remainder of today until 8 p.m. If we can rise as we escort the casket from the chapel. Once we have left the chapel, we ask everybody to go immediately to their vehicles. Please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe turn to your car.